Ina mana, ina reo, ira rangatira ma, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ben. It's great to have you here for this morning's webinar about KMR's approach to planting. As per normal, microphones are off except for those speaking. Questions can go in the chat and we'll answer those either as the presentation is moving through or talk about them at the end, and you'll have access to a recording of this at the conclusion of the webinar. We'll have a couple of speakers today, but firstly I'll hand you over to Dave McDermott, our planting specialist and nursery liaison. Dave, take it away.
Yeah, kia ora everybody. Great to have you along. My name is Dave McDermott. I am a contractor to Kaipara Moana remediation, and my primary role is around working with our nurseries, field advisors, and the Maurikora team to deliver planting projects across the Kaipara Moana catchment. So if Ben, you would like to kick it off, we'll get straight into it. So a couple of slides just to really high-level stuff to frame things up. The mission here is to protect and restore the Kaipara Moana. We've got a huge catchment, as many of you will know. The catchment covers 2 regions, 7 major river systems, many sub-catchments and micro-catchments. We have a complex landscape that we're dealing with, and so planting, our approach to planting needs to be fit for purpose and responsive to sites, but also responsive to landowner aspirations. We have 9 eco-districts also. So eco-districts are a way of measuring the landscape in a way that we can think about species selection, site suitability, and things like eco-sourcing, where we're really trying to find the right plant in the right for the right spot. That's essentially it. Again, our big mission is sediment. So sediment is the #1 enemy of the Kaipara Moana, essentially, and our approach is fencing and planting, and that is about sediment reduction into the harbour. We've got, as you can see, there's multiple issues, types of slips, streambank erosion and hill country erosion are our 2 biggest issues. It's roughly half and half according to the science. So our approach really is to identify where those hotspots are and to come up with the best approach that we're able to address those issues on farm, working with landowners of all kinds to target those areas and hopefully to turn off that tap, and so we can actually we're aiming to reduce our the sediment by, I think it's 50%. So that's the goal. How we go about that in the landscape takes multiple. It can take multiple. There's multiple ways of doing so. We want to protect existing forest blocks by fencing, especially those with waterways running through them. You can see things like native regen happening in our landscapes. Silver pastoral systems are a way of maintaining pasture on farm, but also reducing sediment into waterways. We're also looking at mixed native and exotic woodlots. Riparian planting is something we've done a lot of in the last few years. Then, of course, we've got wetlands, which are really important, and thinking about afforestation of all kinds. So we're really taking a multi-pronged approach, and we're looking to respond not only to the landscape, the needs of the whenua, but also the aspirations of landowners. To help us with all of this, we've got some pretty nifty tools that we're using. This shot here is an image of a physiographic model that helps us to understand where the most severe erosion is likely to be occurring in the landscape. We're able to use those maps as well as photo oblique, which is that image on the right hand side, and our Mātaini Kura tool, which is what our field advisors use to identify where the hotspots are, to figure out the best plan of attack on how to address that issue, and really just make sure that we're ground truthing. It's all great to have excellent data, which we're starting to really be able to tap into, but obviously for every project, there's an important relationship that needs to be formed on site with the landowner, but also a deeper understanding of what's happening on the ground. So how we do that, sediment reduction plans. Now, these are plans that are drawn up by field advisors out in the field, and it's a way of identifying hotspots of erosion on farm, but also of measuring those interventions that we are hoping to land on site. So it might be fencing, it might be planting, it might be a combination of those. We have a minimum land holding of 20 hectares, but that is something that can be discussed. If there's a smaller landholder and there's a severe problem, then that's something we want to hear about, because there is some flexibility there. We're also really interested in how perhaps multiple smaller lot owners can collaborate. I'm thinking about, like, we're talking about lifestyle block owners and etc., to actually come up with a plan that can be delivered across perhaps multiple titles, but to focus, to really focus on reducing sediment through a subcatchment, essentially. We have it's really about a digital record and making sure that everything's measured accurately, and that we're able to deliver on our promises in a really efficient way. So fences first. This is a really important one. We've got major problem, as many of you know. There's lots of places in the Kaipara Moana catchment where there are no fences, and we need to, our real focus first and foremost is to get stock out of waterways and wetlands and off eroding hill country. So a lot of the time we are focused on fences, and that's the first cab off the rank as far as if these projects go. With that said, we often have projects where there's a fence and there's going to be planting happening, and it's all about getting the timing right, staging the project so that we're engaged with contractors and with nurseries in a timely fashion, and that we're responding to the seasonal changes on farm. We're able to stage these works so that we can be cost effective and efficient in the way we approach things. Now, sometimes we have a situation where there are no stock animals for whatever reason. The landowner has decided to retire their pasture into forest, in which case, obviously, fences may not be required. Every farm, every piece of whenua that we engage with is different. So we have this multi-pronged approach that we really hope can respond to each situation. So planting with KMR, there's a lot of words on the slide, but I will just summarize. Essentially, there are steps you need to go through in order to access the grant funding. And it's really important that everyone understands that we need a formal expression of interest via the website or via the Hono email. That means that we can log your interest, and we're able to then get in touch and assess the suitability of your farm or your land to our program, but also we can then assign a field advisor and get that process rolling. Typically, it's a 50-50 co-funding model where there is we do a calculation of what the works were going to cost based on our schedule of prices, which is on the website, which is really worth having a look at that if you're interested. And we have a minimum planting area of 0.25 hectares, which really is about us. KMR is really focused on impact at scale. And what we've found is that once you get above about a quarter of a hectare, it's roughly about 1,000 stems of native at a typical stocking rate. That becomes a bit more complex, and often, that's where really we were interested in working. We have annual deadlines that we're trying to, just encourage landowners and our field advisors to meet, and that's around plant supply. Essentially, each year, of course, we have nurseries coming on board with new stock, and currently at the moment I'm working with the nurseries around how many of what species they've got and figuring out how we're going to distribute those across the projects. So that's why we really do need to have some soft deadlines that we can encourage people towards. And so there, and then we do get KMR accredited nurseries. The work can be undertaken by contractors and or landowners, but we encourage working with contractors, especially when we get to a larger scale. Right. So the way that we approach right plant in the right place is really a simplified version of what is actually a very complex hydrological and geomorphological set of challenges on site. So in the riparian zone, we've broken it into zones A, B, and C, and this is essentially about wetness. So if field advisors out on site, they are able to assess the planting area based on whether it's permanently wet, whether it's subject to fairly regular flooding, that would be zone B, or whether it's in what we call a transition zone, which is essentially above the floodplain, dry for most of the year round, but still still influential on the riparian zone. Now, beyond that, when we get up into the hill country, we essentially call that zone D, and that is to help us figure out, well, essentially identify what species belong there and what type of planting regime we might adopt in order to best target that erodible hill country. And with all of our planting zones, we expect that there will be setbacks from fences, depending on what you're planting, at what density and what species, then those setbacks will vary. But that's about maintenance of fences, especially electric fences. And it's about access to those planting areas and making sure that maintenance, releasing and those types of things is actually something that can be done with relative ease. Thanks. So our planting guide is a document that's available online. We also have hard copies that are distributed at certain events around the Kaipara Moana catchment. And I encourage you to go and have a look at it. It is a living document in the sense that we do review it each year, and we look to refine things as we go along. But each of those zones that we've just mentioned has got a plant list attached to it, and that is about plants that are suited and are suited to these different zones within the Kaipara Moana catchments. So these would be plants that could be eco-sourced from the local area. They're plants that are commonly grown by our native plant nurseries, and they're also plants that are useful for soil conservation. So we've also, one thing to note there is that you'll see there's a few species there that are highlighted. Now we wanted to do that because that's a fairly long list of plants. It could be a lot longer, but for some people they see that and that's a lot of plants. We wanted to make sure that everyone's on the same page as far as, well, look, if you're only thinking of half a dozen plant species or even less than that, then these are the ones that are going to give you best bang for buck and are typically going to be most reliable on site. Exotic trees for erodible hill country. So this year is our first foray as a program into co-funding non-native trees. This is about site suitability and about making sure that landowner aspirations are considered and that we get as much of this eroding hill country into non-pine trees as we possibly can. Now, with that said, there are certain exotic species that need certain management regimes, and that is why for anyone who's wanting to do planting of exotics in hill country, they require a planting plan from KMR, which is reviewed by a registered forest advisor. We are quite careful about how these exotic trees are planted into the landscape. And we've had quite a high level of interest in this year. So what we don't want is for KMR to be excluded from these conversations. So hence we want to be right there and helping landowners to get over the line with retiring erodible hill country. Our eco districts here, I touched on this earlier. Now these are really about helping us to understand what should be growing where. And it's really about biodiversity patterns. And it's for our nurseries and partners who are out there collecting seed, doing that good work. Most of these are fairly similar. The one outlier, or the one that really stands out, is quite unique within the Moana catchment, is the Kaipara Eco District, which is number 5 there, and it runs down really the westernmost portion of the Kaipara Moana catchment, and it includes some of the inner harbour edges. Though the way that it stands out really is around its soil. So those are typically sandy soils, and on those sandy soils we have some of our more rare species of plants. We also have a lot of those species are highly adapted to those conditions, and so we want to make sure that we're not sending plants that shouldn't be on those sandy soils into these sensitive environments. But we also want to make sure that the ones we are sending out there are suited to sand, and therefore have a higher chance of survival and establishing forests, which is what we're all about. You know, they're about Kunzea, KMR accredited nurseries. That's great. Carry on, Ben. So our accredited nurseries, we've got 19 accredited nurseries at this point in time, and as you can see, they're spread fairly well across the catchment. We're into our third winter planting with our accredited nurseries, and it's going really well. We've got a spread of very small to very large nurseries, each with their own approach to how they manage their businesses and how they are connected with the community. So, we are fortunate that in the Kaipara Moana catchment we have some of the largest nurseries in the country. We've got some amazing skills there and ability to scale up. It's also worth noting that we also have a lot of small operators who are very passionate and are very well connected with their local communities and understand their local ecosystems better than just about anybody else. So it's part of my job is tapping into that knowledge and helping our program by really boosting those relationships and making sure that there's a fair share of plant sourcing across the catchment. We have our accreditation standards really focus on those things that make that are essentially very unique to the plant nursery business, and that is around biosecurity, eco-sourcing, and quality of plants, health and safety, and alignment with our kaupapa. And as I said, we've got some really passionate people, and we want to be able to work with all of those scales, and we're doing so. Now, each year we have an allocation of plants to each of these nurseries based on the scale of their operation, and that is around us that fair share, which is part of the KMO kaupapa. KMO is really keen to honour existing relationships in our rural communities, and so a landowner, anyone who's taking on a project with KMO, is able to they can make the decision on who supplies their plants if they wish to. In many cases, they're quite happy for KMR to source their plants on their behalf, in which case we would assign the most local or the most suitable nursery to that project. Now, it's important to know that once you get over 2,500 stems for your project, which is typically a typical size, so on the smaller end of things, but once you get over 2,500 stems. KMR is involved. I'm involved with making sure that the plants that are being sent out are going to be the right thing for the site. I work with the field advisors and when needed with the landowner to make sure that the species being selected are suited to the site, but also are available at the local level. So very good. So this is more of a general slide around what KMR can co-fund. We've talked about riparian and coastal fencing, native planting, assisted native regen is a new tool in the kit. We are co-funding the retirement of areas of hill country that are showing signs of native forest regeneration. And the funding really there is about managing those invasive species that are perhaps slowing down that regen or and looking to assist landowners to manage those blocks back into native forest. There's a lot, as many of you will know, there's a lot of hill country that is really trying really hard to go back into native forest. And KMR is really interested in and is really determined to support landowners who perhaps can see what's happening and are keen to make that a reality on their site. Space planting and pasture, exotic species. These are all via expressions of interest. And there's a note there. There's a really important date there, 31st of March. That is for poplar planting this winter. So if you or anyone you know is interested in planting poplars, then that's the cutoff date for your expression of interest. So we've got Duncan Curvell here in the room, and Duncan, that's his department, but Duncan and I work really closely around that supply. That'll be part of the package this year for KMR.
Great, thanks, Dave. There are also links in the chat as well to where you can fill out those EOIs. Before we get into questions, I'll just hand over to Justine Dorr, who's going to take us through a bit of an update on the project overall. Justine.
Hello everyone, nice to see you. Just another important date though, we're still looking for expressions of interest for native planting this winter by the 30th of April too. So we know that often those smaller plantings can come in quite late in the winter, which puts a bit of pressure on the team. So yeah, if you are thinking about planting, just drop us a really short line just so we get you in the queue, and then we can guarantee that we'll be able to sort you out in time for winter planting. And we know that this winter will likely be a shorter winter planting than last year because it is a bit drier already in some areas. So that's just an important date. Anyway, I'm just ending off with a couple of how we're going, and that's just really to thank all the landowners and suppliers. Really, our kaupapa is to invest in local jobs and skills across the landscape, across our whole catchment. And the numbers here are starting to get pretty big now, just over 2 years of Kaipara Moana remediation operations. So, you know, well done to all those people who are helping make this work in terms of local jobs and local skills, and many of them are online today. So thank you for that. In terms of participation, I wanted to call out a couple of things that, you know, I'm really proud of the team for working on, and that is, you know, we are working with half of the pastoral landowners in this catchment. That's a lot, nearly 600 odd. These numbers are also from the end of January. Probably tomorrow.
I think we've lost Justine there. Hopefully she'll come back and join us. A couple of the highlights. Oh, you're back, Justine.
Sorry, everyone. I think I dropped out there, just Wi-Fi. My apologies. I'm down in Auckland today in a rural area. Sorry, everyone. So around 600 landowners. I'm not sure what Ben said, but around 600 landowners in the kaupapa. What I wanted to speak of is that we've had one community group, catchment group, iwi or hapu group, join us every fortnight since we started full operations. And we're really proud of that, because I think the perception is that we don't work with little groups around the rohe. We actually do, and there's a lot of them. So it's a really cost-effective an efficient way for KMR to act as an umbrella for all of these little groups. We provide a lot of support. It means there's not reinvention of the wheel. And from my perspective, it's a really great way of supporting little groups that may not exist yet. So if you are trying to set up a little catchment group, and I know I'm just calling out Sue again, because I know her and Karen have done amazing work in this space. If you have got a group of landowners around a river system in particular that you'd like a bit of a hand with, please do get in touch. We also have Y Connection, our partners, who will be able to support you. So just want to really call out a new group joins us every fortnight, which is pretty incredible. And we've got a lot of other landowners working with us at the minute. So it's a lot is going on, and some of it is pretty invisible to others. So anyway, thank you, Ben. Just in terms of our outcomes on the ground, as you can see, these numbers are getting pretty big now, just over 2 years into full operations. A lot of fencing's gone on. As Dave mentioned, it's fencing first, but now we've had enough landowners who are getting into the second year of their works on their land, or even the third year in some small case, and small number of cases. So a lot of trees are contracted either in the ground or contracted to go in the ground at this point. Just a note that right now we are not yet capturing the areas of wetland protected. We will be doing that fairly shortly with some upgrades to our online digital systems. That's a really important metric, not only for the Crown and Regional Council investors, but because wetlands are a really important biodiversity reservoir, as you know, and also an important carbon sink. So we are looking to really be able to tell that story more consistently to our co-funders, our investors, and also some of the more commercial new revenue generation opportunities on farm will also look to leverage that information. So a lot going on, and we're really pretty proud of that. So well done to all the landowners and all our suppliers who make that happen. Kia ora. Now we're on to questions, so I'm handing back to Ben. Thank you.
Thanks, Justine. Yes, if you've got a question, you can either type it into the box or raise your hand and we can work your way through them there. Justine, did you want to talk about the question that was asked earlier about alternative to fencing, such as halters or halters product?
Yes. Yes, so just for those who are interested, look, we are keeping quite an eye on halter and other similar technologies. We do fund stock exclusion rather than fencing, but right.
We'll come back to Justine, hopefully, if she rejoins us. Due to the technology not being sufficiently developed, there's some questions and some research we're looking at with landowners who are running halter type products, and we will look to explore those options moving forward. I see there was a message about being unable to contact us by phone. I'll talk to that, and I'll come back to you on that, Delwyn, as well, as something moving forward. Does anyone have any other questions about planting, species selection? Burke's asked the process for starting a catchment group. Would anyone, Dave or Duncan, would you like to offer your advice on starting a catchment group?
Yeah,
you can answer that one, Duncan.
Yeah, I'll have a go. Kia ora, thank you, Bert, for your question. Interesting, I've spent the last 2 days in Auckland thinking about what makes a good catchment group and successes of catchment group. Starting from the ground up is definitely the best way to start a catchment group. There's a lot of support out there with KMR, the Y Connection, what are they called? Yeah, lots and lots of organisations are now getting into the space, and I think it's definitely a movement like the new government is supporting. KMR can support with respect to the activities on the land, and we have our funding program that also supports a bit of management of these groups as well. And there's lots of support and capability and capacity building within Y Connection, which is Mountains to Sea Trust, to support your groups. And really, it's about getting a clear vision, a clear objective of where you want to go as a catchment group, as a collective of landowners, and prioritising what you want to do, and then reaching out. There's a lot of help there. We can help within KMR, and our partners can help as well. I think Justine's back. She might have more to say on that. Kia ora.
Sorry, everyone. This is the joys of working remotely and rurally, but I know you all understand. But look, was that the Halter question there, Duncan? Or was that a community question? Sorry, I dropped out for quite a while.
Catchment group question, Justine.
Oh, right. Yes. Look, we've got, so just on that, I've dropped, I think it was one of the, in the chat, I've dropped some information, but look, we tend to be able to invest, KMR can invest in catchment groups or groups generally, collectives generally, when they're established, but sometimes it's hard for us to reach too far back. So we have just developed, it will be announced on Monday, a strategic partnership with a group called Y Connection, which is funded by the Ministry for the Environment, the Crown, to begin supporting groups that want to start. Now, right now, KMR is happy to be a no wrong door or a front door for anyone who wants to understand more about that support. It's real support, both in Auckland and Northland regions. There's 2 groups. We will make sure it's seamless. So just drop us a line at Hono, our general email, and we will make sure that the Y Connection teams, plural, get back and tell you what support they can offer. And it's a real person on the ground. There's some resources there. It's going to be really important, I think. And then once the group's up and running, KMR can then support through our Whenua Whānui Fund, our funding system for collectives and groups. Hope that helps.
Great, thanks, Justine. Dave, there's a question here, concerns from someone about eco-sourcing and the limited adaptation needed under climate change. Did you have any thoughts around that and our sort of approach moving forward?
Great question. Yeah, it's a really juicy topic. Obviously, we are living in a very dynamic landscape, and there are changes happening at a scale and pace that we're not fully able to grasp. I think as far as plant species go, I think that it speaks to the need for eco-sourcing as a principle, being that we are looking for healthy forests to source our plants from in a local level, sub-catchment or eco-district level. There's a real risk that when we're doing revegetation planting, often it's into sites that are open. Where a lot of our planting is into ex-pasture land, so we typically go for less is more approach, as in as far as the species selection goes, and that is about establishing some canopy closure over those sites as quickly as we can. But with that said, it's important that we also are, I think, cognizant of the fact that we've got a lot of species that we can be planting out, and that with the pressures of climate change and just climate events on us, I think we all need to be very aware and observant of patterns, changes we're seeing in the landscape. I'm not sure how to answer the question as far as the climate change goes, because I feel like we're going to have we've definitely got our work cut out for us. But by following some of these principles around eco-sourcing and about really focusing on right plant for the right place, I'd like to think that we're at least putting our best foot forward as far as building resilience for these plantings.
Thanks, Dave. Justine, did you want to try again on the halter topic?
Sure. And look, fingers crossed I stay in. Look, the halter technology is really interesting for us because KMR in theory funds stock exclusion from waterways and from, in some cases, steep and moving hillsides. So really we're looking for stock being off, especially heavy stock, and out of the waterways, which we know creates a lot of sedimentation. But that said, right now fencing is the only demonstrable way of ensuring that stock exclusion, that exclusion from waterways, exclusion from slipped areas. And the reason why we are very much in a watching brief with Halter and other technologies, the technology is not quite there yet to guarantee that exclusion. I won't go into the technical details, but essentially for animal welfare reasons, the technology allows animals to be beyond the fence line in the Halter technology for actually quite some time, and experience has shown that while those animals are across the fence, they are eating stock, they're sitting on stock, they're trampling, plants, they're sitting, trampling, eating a lot of the plants we've just paid quite a lot of money with the landowner to put in, and so we can't guarantee the survival of those plants. However, they are, Halter is in particular in live discussion around perhaps modifying the system. It's not a guaranteed change, but to allow a little bit more of those environmental protections to be to have assurance that they can be sustained, because what we need is plants still to be alive, and our survival rates are contractual on the landowner. So we need to have confidence in the technology before we'll accept that technology, and we're definitely not there yet. The timeframes that Halter have indicated are a possibility is between 12 and 15 months or thereabouts. So we're just in dialogue and waiting to see the results of any changes should they happen. Hopefully that's clear enough for people.
Thanks, Justine. A question from Andrew as well. How much of your planting includes extras such as plant protectors, fertilizer tabs, and what requirements are there on landowners around pest control? Dave,
great question. Yeah, sure. So at the moment there isn't. We're running on. We want to make sure that these projects are rolled out as efficiently as possible, but also cost effectively as possible. And there currently isn't budget for fertilizer tabs. I believe we do have some plant protectors that are available. Justine might want to talk to that, but those typically are, and pest control is another thing. There's an expectation on the landowner that pest control and pest control is undertaken. It's not something that KMR co-funds. We typically are looking for evidence of browser damage when we go to inspect planting sites. So there really is. It takes two to tango in the sense, KMR is there to support and to co-fund these projects, but ultimately the landowner has to take on responsibility for some of those aspects in order to ensure success of their planting. So at this stage, that's where we're at.
Yes, I can add to that. Thanks, Dave. So right now we provide plant guards for some community and school projects, and that's because in most cases plant guards are not necessary for plant survival. We have a custodian role for the investment from our many investment partners, and we only fund things that are necessary for the outcomes we're seeking. We also find them really useful from a community engagement and a rangatahi engagement perspective, which is why those projects are mainly provided with the plant guards, not all of them, but some of them. Fertilizer tabs are an interesting one because right now we do not fund them. We don't think they're necessary. You may be aware, we're trialling some bioplastic pot plants for one particular nursery at the minute. That actually has fertilizer in the bioplastic. It's a biodegradable pot that you plant the whole pot. It has some advantages because it is a bit more drought friendly for the plant, and it also protects against floods to some degree. A lot of research around these bioplastics. We don't have a lot of them, but they also have fertilizer baked through the pot. So survival rates, research from those bioplastic pots, they're called Polbionics pots from a strategic partner, Polbionics, which is a spin-off out of the Crown Research Institute, Scion Research. Anyway, there's something that we're actually looking at, just a trial on some of those navigator sites at the minute and with some community plantings, but they're not widely available because right now we haven't got a demonstrated need. Just on pest control, contractually, if there are pests, and either the landowner or the field advisor will be aware of the pest activity, contractually you just have to manage the survival rates of those plants, and that may mean pest control. and some advice will come to you to the landowner, to the group, from the field advisor, as Dave mentioned. While I have the microphone and while my Wi-Fi is going, I may just jump into Delwyn's question around not having a phone. Look, we are asking people to email us, and that's because we have a pretty small team in KMR. Right now, it's just over 10 people across 600,000 hectares. We're often on the road and we're often out of range. Cell phone, we tried a cell phone, but it didn't work for us as humans in a pretty tight and small team. So we are relying on our email to triage, if you like, to make sure we manage 600 landowners in many groups. So that works for us. Appreciate it doesn't always work 100% for others, but if you can, please do drop us an email or ring during working hours, and someone should pick up the phone, and you just ring through the Northern Regional Council where we're based, in Whangarei office, and someone will be put through. But generally speaking, it's much safer and we can get to you quicker if you do email, as per the slide. Really appreciate your patience. It's a pretty big area. It's a lot of people to support, a lot of groups to support, and it's a really tiny team. So kia ora for that.
Thanks, Justine. Julie mentioned as well her experience for Auckland as survival is pretty unpredictable with regards to species and varies across sites as well as between sites in regards to the climate change question from before, and her feeling is that planting is diversity of species is vital, so planting 6+ per site, which is definitely in line with where we're at as well. I think one last question from Andrew: do KMR require a set proportion of natives planted in an area to be pioneer species? Did you want to explain?
Yeah, I can answer that one. Yes, essentially those you'll see in the planting guide, Andrew, that there's primary species and secondary species listed. They are suggestions. The primary species are typically considered to be pioneer species, and those ones highlighted within the primary species list for each zone are definitely your go-to, and they're going to be the ones who are forming a canopy as quickly as possible and taking on, what is often quite challenging site conditions. And I think just to add to the point about the climate change question and survivability of our plantings, it really does speak to the fact that in Auckland and in Northland, we have a fairly narrow planting window. I think despite the fact that we like to think of ourselves as subtropical, we all know that that drought can come suddenly and last for quite some time. We have a real focus on planting in June, July, if possible, and that that is about putting as much hope where it's really about making sure that those plantings are getting the best chance they have of survival, and not hoping for the best in October, which does happen sometimes. And we really want to make sure that our plants are getting the best start. Yeah, that answers your question, Andrew.
Thanks, Dave. If there's no further questions, if they come rushing through, I'd say thanks to Dave and Justine and Duncan for answering questions today and for the interactions in the chat. It's always wonderful. As I mentioned before, you will get a recording of this sent through to you. We'll post it up on our YouTube to be shared around. There's links in the chat as well to the planting guide, the schedule of prices, the full planting list, and how you can do expressions of interest as well, or email through hono@kmr.org.nz. We'll be back with another webinar, a topic to be decided in a couple of months. Otherwise, one more question from Sue. Is it possible to combine retirement of land to planting with retirement for gaining transferable titles? In Auckland, the cost to get titles by retiring land can be prohibitive. Justine, did you want to talk about transferable titles?
Yes, because our settings on this have just changed, so it's a great question, Sue. So we don't pay for resource consent-led or required activities generally, which includes in the Auckland region a transferable title limitation, for those who know what that is. We will not pay for you can subdivide essentially in Auckland through transferable title on your land. KMR will pay for works in areas that are not subject to those requirements. However, within 5 years, if you do subdivide, then contractually you'll need to pay us some dollars back. So it's a more sophisticated in a shorter setting than what you may have heard previously. And that's to align to a whole bunch of things, but it's also, you know, farms are very big usually, land is very big if you are subdividing. The benefit to the moana and the benefit to the communities, plural, around planting up waterways is irrespective of who owns the land, whether it's now or into the future. So that's why we've made that change. It's actually a good outcome for everyone if those waterways are planted, fenced off and planted up and protected, and it ultimately achieves our long-term reduction in sediment flows into the moana. There are some real specifics though, so if you're interested, it's not a blanket no, it's not a blanket yes. Get in touch with us and we can let you know what the requirements are around transferable title plantings within the 5 years of your intention to subdivide. But don't let that be a barrier